First of all, it's nice to meet you live in person.
It's nice to meet you too.
Yeah. I want to welcome everyone who is here, and I would like to take a moment to introduce you to Abigail Thomas. I'm Karin Gutman, by the way, for those of you whom I don't know. And we have here Abigail Thomas, who, to my mind, is an iconic voice in the world of writing, particularly memoir. You are so humble. I can already see you sort of like
Thank you.
letting that roll off of you. She's the author of many acclaimed memoirs, including A Three Dog Life, Safekeeping, What Comes Next, and How to Like It. And her latest, which is Still Life at 80, The Next Interesting Thing, where she ruminates on aging during the COVID pandemic with her trademark mix of humor and wisdom, as well as many valuable writing tips along the way. And she lives in Woodstock, New York, with her dogs. How many dogs do you have now?
Just two.
Ah,
Just two. But
I
good
see.
dogs.
Mm. So anyway, Abby, it is an honor and a privilege to have you here with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so grateful to be asked. Thank you. Thank you, really.
I have to sort of call back to when I first was introduced to your work, and I reached out to you. I wrote you an email and you responded to me. This was back in 2011 when I was early on in my teaching career. I think I forwarded you the old correspondence
Mhm.
and seeking your guidance on writing, seeking your guidance on how you work with memoir writers. And you were responsive and encouraging and accessible. And it really meant a lot to me at the time. And to be honest with you, if I knew better, I would have been more intimidated. but
No,
uh but I guess beginner's mind works to your advantage sometimes. But I feel like it's the same spirit that you bring to your writing, that kind of spaciousness and I don't know, the willingness to meet and engage whatever the moment brings. So
curiosity
mm,
and
yeah.
nice people.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. Um, so anyway, I thought it might be, in all the sort of things that interviews that I've read with you and also reading your work, I'm curious actually to know a little bit more about your background, your childhood, because I sort of noticed that it's not something you've written much about, and yet it must have obviously influenced you quite a bit, the way you were raised, and in particular, being raised by a writer. Your father, um, for those who don't know, was Lewis Thomas, who wrote The Lies of a Cell, and renowned physician, and also a humanist at heart.
Mhm.
It would seem. Is this where you absorbed maybe early on your appreciation for the written word and you know and for curiosity, which is what you just spoke to?
Well, I remember before my father, my father wrote poetry in the 30s and 40s, which the Atlantic published. And I'd read those, but he didn't, and I loved his poems, but he really didn't start writing for the New England Journal of Medicine or then having it put in the book until the 70s. So I was already a teenager. How old was I? I forget. How old was I in the 70s? I was born in 1941. Um, but if he was excited about something, if something was going well or almost well in his lab, there would be a sort of tremble and tremor in his voice as he talked about something I had no understanding of. And I thought to myself, that's the way I want to live. I want to live on the verge, just where he is right now, of something you don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be good. And that
Mm,
is what writing does for all of us, I think. It gives you that you wake up in gear and you can't wait to see where you are, where you've been,
Mm,
where you're going, because you don't half the time know where you're going.
mm,
So there was that. And my mother loved to tell a very long story, whether anyone was interested in it or not, about the Albigensian heresy or God knows what. And she also was very snobby about words. And I think I inherited that because I can't stand the word lifestyle. I've never used it except to say I hate it. And I can't stand the word journaling, to journal. I believe in
mm,
diaries. So there's that there's that sort of respect for the language that you're using.
mhm,
But most of all, I think when I read my father, I think so much of it is the rhythm of his words. Not so, I mean, yes, the words matter, but the rhythm matters so much. And that's what matters to me when I read my stuff aloud. If the rhythm works and feels like what it is that I'm writing about,
mm,
I know I'm okay. We moved a lot. I was born in Boston and we moved to New York and Baltimore, New Orleans, St. Paul, little place outside the city called Smeaton's Landing, and then back to New York. So I went to 11 schools, and every couple of years we were in a different place. I don't know what that had to do with anything.
yeah, I'm
I
curious.
I got kicked out of Bryn Mawr freshman year for being pregnant. I think if I'd gone to college, I would never have become a writer. I would have been so terrified of words like narrative arc, even theme. Just like
Mhm,
horrible.
mhm,
Stand them. So I was lucky in that regard. To,
mhm.
I never went back to college, and I never missed it. Um, I don't know what else to say. I mean, we moved so many times that you didn't bother really to make a friend because we were going to be gone before you knew it. Um,
Mm,
it was interesting seeing different parts of the world, going from New Orleans to St. Paul. And I don't know. I don't
mm.
know how my upbringing influenced me, frankly.
Well, I mean, it seems like it nurtured a kind of openness, and there was kind of a positive aspect of not being tethered.
Well, there's that. And I did a lot of reading. I think we all did.
Hmm.
Um, I always wanted, I always wanted to write. I mean, I loved writing things when I was in school, little, young school. What did we have to write once? I am a loaf of bread. We had to write a story called I Am a Loaf of Bread. And my mother loved what I wrote. And at the very end, I'm being eaten and I'm pretending that it tickles. I don't know. It's just I don't know. I don't.
Well, they sounded encouraging too.
Yeah, they
Y-
were encouraging. They were encouraging. I wrote some poems my mother didn't like, but that's because she didn't really get them.
Mhm, mhm.
Uh, did the way you grew up influence what you're becoming?
It definitely influences, the desire to work with memoir writers. I mean, I grew up in an alcoholic home, so I wasn't really taught, I feel like, in a lot of ways, how to live. And so I think largely the work that I'm doing with writers is a genuine curiosity to learn what it is to be human. Um, and to
Yeah,
and that radical honesty that memoir writers have,
have
is like a oxygen to me.
oh, that's
Um,
interesting. Yeah,
mhm, mhm. So, and reading you, and it's interesting when I read your work, it feels so reassuring, even when you and comforting, even when you write about the really difficult things. Um,
very nice. Thank you.
mm,
Thank you. Well, I think if you stay curious and keep your sense of humor, you're going to be okay. I mean, one is.
mm, mhm.
Even in the darkest of moments, there's probably something hilarious under the bed.
You talk about wanting that the kind of, well, I was going to dive into the creative process a little bit more deeply with you, and maybe I'll put a pin in that thought. Um, well, no, I'll go there. You talk about the process of memoir as going into the basement and pulling out what's down there and raising it up to the light.
Well, it has all its power in the dark. And if you bring it up to the light, you see that it has edges and it's finite. And you
Mm,
look at it really closely. If you keep it in the dark, it's got all the power in the world. And that's just, the parts of you you'd rather not know about or talk about. But we all have them. And we all have them in all aspects of our lives. And it's so much easier. It's so much easier to bring them up and write about them and achieve a kind of clarity that we're all hungering for, whether we know it or not.
mhm,
And it's a way of putting it somewhere else, You, I, and it's also having control over it.
mm,
Nobody can sneak up behind you and say, "I know what you did." I've already told you what I
mhm.
did.
Right.
And that's
What does that mean to put it somewhere else? So you take it out of the basement, you shine it up to the light, and what does it mean to put it somewhere else to you?
you put it in writing, and it's no longer in you.
Mm,
You have found a place to put it.
mhm,
It isn't buried in you somewhere. You've made something out of it. You've made
mhm,
something different and separate out of it. And
mhm,
it's um it's helpful. It's you find it easier to forgive yourself for things that you don't even want to admit to,
mhm,
um, once you've taken them out and looked at them and then written about it. Doesn't mean everything has to go into the book you're writing, but it is important to take a look. I mean,
mhm,
who are you kidding if you don't?
mhm.
It is memoir.
How do
And
you when you take it out and you look at those difficult things that are down in the basement and and you you start writing about them, is it what's your process of kind of peeling back the layers? Because in some ways, you know, how do you know you're being honest, I guess, about something, or how do you know that you need to drill down more,
because
or
you
how?
get very uncomfortable when you write it down, I think, is one of the ways you know you're being honest. I mean, the moment that was hardest for me to live with was after my husband was hurt so badly, with a traumatic brain injury, and after 2 years of rehab and stuff, and he wasn't any better and couldn't live at home, and he was sent up here to, I mean, here, you're not here, but it's near Woodstock where I moved. um he was put in a home, actually a really wonderful place, and instead of driving up once a week to see him, I moved up here. And after a while, I put a life together that I actually really liked.
Mhm.
um, and then one day, as we all do, I sabotaged it and said, "You built this on Rich's track. Who the fuck do you think you are? How can you?" And what I do when I'm at a loss is I will look up a word in the American Heritage Dictionary of Indo-European Roots.
Mhm.
Sometimes in the root of a word, it answers a question you didn't know to ask. But I looked up guilt and it meant guilt. And I looked up a whole bunch of words. And then I looked up acceptance, and acceptance came from a word meaning a thread used in weaving. And I all of a sudden understood, you keep on weaving. You don't, and that was a real turning point in my life. I had nothing to forgive myself for. I was living my life. And so that's what I do. It's covered with clay.
You inspired me.
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
Yes.
Don't you
It's
love it?
well, it's I find it fascinating even the way it's laid out. I mean, do you find that every word that you want to I looked up a word and I was like,
No.
"Oh, it's not there."
Oh, I know. Don't you hate that? It used to be like throwing the I Ching when it was just the back of the American Heritage Big Dictionary, and you'd get a word and, oh, I can go look it up in the back. My favorite word recently is that the word for futility comes from an ancient word meaning a leaky vessel, which is just the most wonderful, perfect example of futility. And it's a kind of history of who we are as a people, how words have changed over
What do you
time.
make of that leaky vessel as it's
Well,
connected to fertility?
no, futility.
Oh, futility.
It's the
Uh,
absolute perfect example of futility.
mm, mm.
Fertility would have been interesting,
Yeah,
though.
very obviously. I was trying to make the connection in my brain.
It have to be a little more than leaky.
Well, I have to say that scene that you just that moment that you described of, oh, I built my life on tragedy is, I think, the most powerful moment in your book, Three Dog
It was the
Life. I
hardest.
I mean that moment where you say, you know, I put myself behind the wheel that hit
Yes.
of the car that hit my
Might as
husband. I
well.
hesitated. Oh, I mean, in fact, I shared it with my writing group this week. That's the excerpt we used. And I mean, to me, I'm just wondering, okay, so I mean, I don't know if you remember the process of writing that. You said it was the hardest thing to write. Was is it is it just as you describe, you write it and then you're kind of uncomfortable with it and then you extend the writing to looking up words? I mean,
Yes.
is that what it's about for you?
When I get as far as I can get, then I look up words that have to do with whatever it is I'm going through. And not always, but often you there is something enlightening about it. And I wish I could remember, my memory is so bad nowadays. I wish I could remember the last really great thing the only thing I can think of right now is futility in a leaky vessel.
Well, I have a word I wanted to talk to you about, the word memory,
Oh, yeah.
which means
Born. It
mourning.
comes, it comes from a meaning of to remember is to mourn. Yeah.
Oh, I when I looked it up in this book, it said mourning and then it said a flicker to flicker, a flicker of light.
Well, that's beautiful. And that is a lot like what memory is like, don't you think?
Yeah,
It's you
tell
have
me
a
about that.
memory and then it's gone and you have to wait for it to come back. But
Mm-hmm.
to remember, but memory and mourn come from the same root, and that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
A sort
Because
of
we
mourn. If you're going to write memoir, good
it's a
luck.
mourning as in
As in mourning, grief.
like grief, loss.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of memoir is inspired by loss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't read too many, oh, what a happy childhood I had things, although there are those things, my family and other animals, and you know, um, but a lot of memory is loss and some kind trying to reconcile
Mm-hmm.
it, clarity out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and also, I mean, memory and story is about change too. And if something's changed, you've lost something. I mean, there's something that's been lost in the change, right? Even if it's
Oh
positive
yeah,
change, there's still loss.
oh yeah. And memory is so tricky because because you can remember something one way and your sister will remember it a completely different way. And somewhere in there, and then it's just such a mystery. I have a memory of a place we used to live, and I've put everything in one place. There was a creek that fell off a palisade into a pool, and there was also a grape arbor and a bunch of, well, I put them all in one place. The grape arbor was over the pool, and when when did I turn my back and let my memory do it that way?
Mm-hmm.
Because how does that work? You're putting all your things, the things you loved the best about the place, in one place, but when? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the more you look at the past, the more unpredictable it becomes. And that's not an example of it, but you discover as you look back, you can see fault lines where you hadn't been able to see them before, and put things together so differently from the way you remember them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very interesting.
So do you trust the way that you remember things? I mean, particularly as you're as the distance between you and the events might be, you know,
Well, I'm either lucky or unlucky in that I don't have a good memory, but what I do remember clearly are moments,
Mm.
free, often freestanding moments, and then vivid memories that I do have, and
Mhm.
I have to trust those. And
Mhm.
you'll get. I mean, when I started writing Safekeeping, which was after my second husband died, we'd been divorced and become very good friends. And suddenly there were all these things that just kept popping out of me, one memory after another, that seemed to have nothing to do with anything, except after I'd gotten quite a few of them done. And I realized I was writing the story of how I got here from there, which is what memoir is. Um, and had I set out to do that, I couldn't possibly have done it. But I did have these certain strong memories,
Mhm. Mhm.
regrets, and that was the hardest thing writing. That was the part about my son who was in boarding school and wanted to come.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other hardest thing, just because it was so important to me, was the very last chapter, which I took a long time getting right. You had to write that in a dozen different ways before I got it the way I liked it.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think when you're writing memoir, if you wind up where you thought you were going to wind up, you probably haven't looked hard enough, or
Mhm. Mhm.
you haven't been, because you got to make room for the surprises,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is part of the just it's just it saves lives. Writing memoir, it makes all the difference in the world.
What does that mean, it saves lives?
Well, if I hadn't, when Rich got hit, that's the only memoir I wrote chronologically as it was happening. I don't know how I would have gotten through any of that if I weren't writing it down,
Mm.
and writing when he said these wonderful, writing everything down, where I was, what I was doing,
Mm.
whether I was in the dog park or in the lunchroom where he was. That saved us both, I think, because if you write it, you can make us. It doesn't really make sense, but it fits together somehow. I don't know how else to say that. When you're going through a real crisis, to keep track of it,
Mm.
it's better than just being lost,
Mm.
you know, just
Mhm.
losing yourself in it.
With safekeeping, you said that you talk about how these moments, these pieces or fragments, I think you'd call them moments, were pouring out of you, these kind of vignettes. And I'm wondering, you obviously trust it, and people have, maybe you yourself, but people have described you as a very intuitive writer, that, that as the moments come out and pour out of you. I'm wondering, once that raw material is out in front of you, say with safekeeping, which is not a linear telling, more, like Three Dog Life, what is the process for you of organizing all of those
That was
pieces?
hard. That was really hard. But it did fall somehow, even though there was a little bit of everything of in each of the three sections. There was the before my husband died, and then there was the dying, and then there was after he died. And somehow or other, even if it wasn't chronologically, um, it wasn't using time. It wasn't chronological, but there was this sort of emotional chronology, I was hoping, as I went through it. But I remember sitting on the floor with my friend and then Agent Chuck and just spreading them all out on the floor in 3 different sections. Well, maybe this can go here and this can go here. And I thought it would end when Quinn died, but I wasn't dead, you know? And something happened, as I wrote in the last chapter, something happened with my eldest daughter and her daughter. And I wanted to get to that point and end there. And I had to somehow earn that ending. So it gave me a whole nother section to, it's putting it together is always hard, I think, unless you're writing a chronological story. But it's hard. It's hard to even believe in chronology anymore when you get to be my age, because time is so peculiar. It dawdles and then it speeds up and then suddenly it's 5 years. It was hard.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so I'm going to just kind of dig a little bit deeper into that, just because I love I love your aversion to this term narrative arc. I just wanted to read a quote that I pulled from let me see. You said, this is from What Comes Next and How to Like It. Here's what I love about painting. It's not about words or voice or tone or point of view or narrative arc, perish the thought. It's about the way certain branches stick straight out from the trunks of certain trees. It's about the clouds that you can barely see, as well as the ones that pile on top of each other. It's about the swoop of telephone wires and the shapes and colors of shadows. So, speaking to this sort of aversion to narrative arc, you just talked about what seems like you relate to more is it the emotional chronology, or is it the emotional drive? It's the emotional, how would you talk about, I mean, really, I'm interested to know how would you, for lack, like, I'm being a little, I guess, intellectual about it, but how would you define what a story is then? If you don't relate to this idea of a narrative arc.
Well, I can tell you what I don't like. I don't like anything approaching perfection. I don't like anything neat and tidy. I like a big mess. I like to write in the first person and the third person, and sometimes the second person. When I make my things out of clay, I like them looking rough, as though somebody just barely put this together. And I think that must have something to do with the way I write. I mean, it's the only thing I can, because I don't know how to answer this, except that I like a bit of a mess. I don't like everything standing straight with its hair combed and its teeth brushed and its buttons all buttoned. I like it. I like for the word curiosity is in my head. I want somebody to be curious to see what she's going to do next, although I've really never thought of that before. I want to be curious to see what I do next, and that sort of produces the whichever direction I'm going in. Gosh, I wish I knew how to think about this.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, it's asking you to analyze your own work, which, is not a super fun, sort of takes away from the experience of it, I suppose.
No,
But
it's just hard because my mind doesn't work that way. I'm not good at I'm not good at analyzing. I think that's because I didn't go back to college. Oh well. I can't do it.
You're giving a good advertisement for not going to school and just being being out, exploring, discovering, being open to the world around you. And
I don't think you need school to be a writer. In fact, I think you need to forget everything you ever learned. when you sit down to start, not
Mhm.
know where you're going, have some vague idea.
What 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 part of, because I know you spent some time in publishing. How did that influence your along the way? Because it was sort of interesting to me that even though you had spent this time in publishing, you didn't arrive, you know, to the page yourself as a writer until your late 40s, and yet you were around it and it was accessible to you. And um
I think that was extremely helpful because something would come in. Um, that I remember getting a book, and of course now I can't. French Dirt, it was called, and it's still in print. Richard Goodman. Um, the book wasn't very good, but the little thing in the very front, which was his discussion of what this book would be about, was really good. I learned that if you pay attention and make suggestions, you can get a really good book out of a writer who hasn't written yet a really good book because you saw 12 sentences that were really good when he
mm,
was paying attention. He wasn't having
mm,
to put anything together. I learned that I learned that a that writer with spark or some kind of talent could get better.
mm,
And it took me a long time to realize. I mean, I don't know about you, but I spent an awfully long time crumpling things up and tossing across. I said, who do you think you are? Because I
mhm,
thought you had to know something and it had to be important and deep and everything. And no, you just really have to start. You just really have to start.
mhm,
Anyway, that's what I learned in publishing. And I
mhm,
loved it. I loved it until they made me an assistant editor. And then I realized I'd really have to know what I was talking about. If I loved a book, I would have to speak for whether it made any money or not. So I quit. I went
mhm,
off and did something else for a little while.
mhm, mhm. Do you think about that, in terms of what you're writing, whether or not it will land with your audiences, or whether or not like anything about the audience or getting it out into the world? Are you writing purely for yourself?
I am writing purely for myself.
Mm,
I'm writing for clarity and I'm writing for fun. And I'm
mm,
writing to see what the hell the back of my mind is doing when the front of my mind is doing nothing. I write to see what uh, I don't know. I mean, it's just so interesting.
mhm,
And the smallest thing can take you somewhere. The smallest detail can take you someplace and you can write 15 or 20 pages of it or 500 pages of it and then you get to the first sentence of what you're really going to write. So
mhm,
nothing is ever wasted when you're writing. So you have to write a lot of stuff to get to the part where you think, oh my God, this is what I want to write about.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
I don't have, I'm not an intellectual.
Yeah, and yet you have organized. I mean, that part of our brains that is the editor, that is putting things together, that you have the raw material, and then you have to put it together in a shape, I guess, a shape that can be shared, a shape that feels like, yes, this is something I want to share with you. Um, in terms of like the editing process, anecdote. My mom's a quilter, and she was making a quilt of a cow, a picture of a cow that we brought back from Switzerland, and it was this youthful, beautiful, sort of vibrant cow, and she translated it, and then she kept stitching, and she kept stitching, and she didn't know when to stop stitching, and it ended up sucking the life and the vitality out of the cow because she stitched so much.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of editing. It's like, at what point do you know how do you know when to stop when it's finished? Because I think at one point you said, you're good at cutting, that's you have a sort of a gift for sort of paring down. And do you know, like, is it just how do you know
because
what its shape is, that you're you're there.
Because if I'm doing a specific memory, I've got a good memory of this specific moment. And all I want to do is get that in there as best I can, as well as I can remember it, and then get out.
Mm,
It doesn't need furniture or jewelry or whether I was a drum major or not. I mean, it just needs to be itself.
mhm,
And that's pretty simple once you get in the habit. And then if you read it out loud to yourself and your voice goes dead, you know it's either boring or there's something hiding behind the chair that you're going to have to take a look at.
mhm, mhm,
Reading aloud is always the way to know whether it's working or not, because your
mm,
voice knows immediately that, oh my God, this whole paragraph, what is this? I'm dying over here.
mhm, mhm. And
But
then yeah, go ahead.
no, you go.
And then the stringing together then, so that you're talking about individual sort of moments or chapters, but like the stringing together is I know I mean you said it's hard. Um
It's it is hard. It is hard. I think it gets easier once you get some sort of idea of the way it's moving,
mm,
and then it, gosh, it's the fact that each section contains both, before I even knew this man to his death, means that you can jump from anywhere to anywhere if you start
mm,
sort of in the middle of things before anybody knows. Ah. At least that's how it was for me. If you start in the middle, you
mm,
can jump you can jump here and then you can jump there and then you can go back. Just I don't know how I
mhm, mm,
just that it's hard. Unless it's a book that has the book I just got was just published was very easy because it's about being old, but it contained the virus. So the
mhm,
whole
mhm,
midsection is the
mhm,
lockdown. And before that, it's I love being old, I love being old, I hate, you know. And then there's the virus, where my only visitors were things that came in through the flap that had fallen off the dog door. So there'd be this strange thing flying through the
mhm,
room, or there'd be spiders and one brown ant climbing on my bookcase. And I thought, is an ant ever lonely? Is a single ant ever lonely? Then you find out they've been alive for 135 million years. And we've been here for 200,000. Look what we've done to the planet. It's just, I was curious and interested in things that I would never have paid any attention to. And
mm,
now that they're back, hi, you're back. Brown ant, black ant, spider. So that was easy because I knew how to get there. I knew what I wanted to do to get there. And once there was a lot of strangeness to it,
mm,
and and a lot of I don't the word it's not really thoughtfulness, but certainly time to brood. Or
mhm,
and also I had a very bad experience with dread for about a year, which had come out of nowhere. And I hadn't had that for 50 years. It's useful dread when you're young, but when you're 80, it's whatever it's telling you, it's way too late.
mhm,
It's way too late to change whatever it is it's telling you is not right. Um, and then there was the after the virus, when, among other things, you find you developed just a teeny bit of agoraphobia, and it was very hard to get actually in the car. You
mhm,
get as far as the car and then run back into the house.
mhm,
So that
mhm,
was an easy one. So I think
mhm,
safekeeping was probably the hardest.
mhm. It sounds like it.
It was probably the hardest. Yeah.
Which one did you say that you had multiple endings? Which was the book where you tried lots of different endings?
Well, the book where I tried not so much different. Well, no, the safekeeping I knew that where I wanted to end after a long time. The book that I had a lot of trouble with beginnings was What Comes Next and How to Like It. I had gotten the whole book ready, and but I couldn't find a way to start it. Um, I just couldn't. I tried it every which way, and until I suddenly thought, I can't write. I began to write. I can't write this book. I can't do this. This is impossible. And so then I wrote about what I was doing instead of writing, which was painting, and that segued right into the book.
Mm,
So sometimes if you're having trouble, just stare at it and say, I hate writing this. I don't want to write this. This is too hard. And these are the following 12 reasons why this is too hard. And I'm just going to stamp my foot and eat chocolate cake forever. And then you might find that you've gotten yourself right into the book.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you find
Yeah.
moving between mediums, these creative mediums, helpful too? Like sometimes
Yes.
you're working with the clay, sometimes the painting, and then you return to the writing and it opens up something.
It really, yeah, it's nice to have something else to do. And the clay is so sensual, which is what I'm doing now. Um, yeah, and the clay has a mind of its own. You can't boss it around. You can't boss writing around either, but you really can't boss the clay around. And that's interesting and fun, and makes for something else to put in whatever you're writing.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. I've done a whole little thing about the clay. Um,
And
and
you're
then
working and you're using your body too. I mean, because
yeah,
so at least for me, it's easy to go into your head when you're, for me, when yet and forget that we have a body. Um,
yeah,
but
when
with the
you're writing.
clay, you're, you know,
Yeah, oh yeah. And you're making something with a body or a face or whatever it is that's appeared to you in your hand or you have had in mind before you even grabbed it into the bag. It's nice to have two things you do because if you're not writing and if a I think a lot all of us writers who are stuck somewhere and can't or don't write, it's extremely depressing and you wonder what the point of view is. But if you have something else you're doing, it fills that need to
mm,
make. Because I think we're supposed to make things with our thumbs and imaginations, and because otherwise it's just shopping,
mm-hmm,
which can be very creative. But I think that's what a lot of this country has turned to use a creative as a creative outlet.
mm-hmm.
But it's there's more interesting things to do.
Do you have a particular writing practice or ritual, or has that evolved over the years? Like a certain place you write, a certain pen you write with? I know
I
you like
used
moleskins.
Yeah, I know. But when I got this old, my right hand doesn't want to write and I can't read my writing. So it was Moleskines and a wonderful scratchy pen. But now I just sit in this chair. And when we're writing, you're writing all the time, whether you're sitting in a chair making words on the page, you're walking around the house muttering and thinking and driving in your car somewhere, you're writing all the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And not everybody understands that. I didn't think you were writing, but that's why I live alone
mm-hmm.
with dogs.
I think you wrote one time, walking around and muttering seems to hasten the process of writing. I
Yes,
love that.
it does. And plus, it's just fun. It's just fun to walk around like a crazy person.
Do you write longhand still, or are you writing directly on the computer?
I write some in longhand, but my um, I can't read my writing anymore. I mean, it's hard for me to read my writing anymore. So I was very stuck up about writing by hand back
Mm-hmm.
in the day when I could do it. I'm not stuck up about that anymore. I'm very happy with writing on the computer, which
Mm.
is where I can write.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you
Well,
do?
when I first write, I'm writing by hand, and then I think once I any kind of editing, I think I move over to the computer when I have a better idea of what I'm writing.
Yeah. Sometimes if you print it out in a font that isn't the font you write in, it looks as though somebody else wrote it and you can
That's
be.
interesting. I like that idea. Um, I want to open it up to questions here, but I want to ask you one sort of non sequitur question, but I am interested to hear how you think about writing about other people. Because I know in safekeeping there's a chapter that I love where, your sister says to you, where are the kids? You're like, well, that's not the point. But they're everywhere in this, but I don't need to talk about their lives per se to write this particular story. And then and uh, what comes next and how to like it, you are writing um, about
Well,
your daughter, your
that was
daughter's experience.
it was Chuck who asked me to write that.
Mm,
And I talked to Catherine and I talked to Chuck about what would have to go in. And I showed them everything I was doing, and it was all right. I wouldn't have done it if he hadn't asked me, and I
mhm.
wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been all right with Catherine.
Okay.
I don't ordinarily. I mean, when I wrote a three dog life, my husband Rich had three children, two of whom were, well, to say they were useless is the kindest thing I could say. So I just left them out of the book.
Mhm,
I didn't put in about how they were never any help or anything. I just
mhm,
left them out instead of, it's you don't want to you don't want to you don't want to I don't want to write badly about people that um I just don't want to do that.
mhm,
It's not my job, and their
mhm,
stories are their stories. But instead of having to either turn them into nice people or turn them into the I just left them out of the book.
mhm. So
What
it hasn't inhibited you from writing the stories that you want to write about or writing the things you want to write about. Because I mean, we have people all around us,
we do, but
interacting.
I'm not um I'm trying to think. I'm I if there's something nasty to say, I don't want to say it. If
Mm,
there's some revenge I want to seek, I'll do that in fiction.
mhm,
You can do it much better in fiction.
mhm,
You can kill them and leave them
mhm. Right. Do whatever you want.
in
Um, what's your I mean, you've watched Memoir evolve over the years. I mean, what's your perspective on the genre? I know it's your preferred genre to write in.
I love that it wasn't just a fad that disappeared.
Hmm.
And people kept saying, this is going to be over with in a year's time. Don't bother. Don't do it. I love that we're curious about other people's lives and that people are willing to write them. Um, it's been a while since I could read anything of any great length that wasn't a student. So it's hard for me to talk about what memoir is like nowadays. I just love that it's still alive. I just love that it's as vital an art form as ever. More so probably.
Do you have a sense of why that is? Do you have a philosophy on like what that says about where we are
Well, I'm
in the
just
world and
hoping
as a
that it's,
people?
I just hope that we're curious about each other and interested in each other and need help from each other, and all of those things can be satisfied in a memoir. You can read about somebody who's experienced something that you've experienced but haven't sort of put together, and it helps when you read somebody else's experience. I think.
Hmm.
I mean, I know it does.
Hmm.
um,
Definitely.
yeah.
Let me see if there are some questions. We have someone who is curious to know more about the experience of deciding to write about Chuck and Catherine.
I would never have done it if Chuck hadn't said, I want, actually, he was very depressed. And I said, what can I do for you? And he said, write a book. And I said, what about? And he said, the three of us. And I said, you mean you and me and Catherine? And he said, yeah. And then he said, what did he say? I can't remember. Maybe it was, make it fiction. You'll have to lie sooner or later. I said, I can't write fiction. And when I was having the one of my first assignments that I gave my classes 100 years ago was to take any 10 years of your life, reduce them to 2 pages, and every sentence has to be 3 words long. I was having a really hard time getting started with this book. And I said to Chuck, you have to tell me what made us such good friends so quickly. Why were we such good friends so quickly? And he wrote back, she was funny. So was I. We met when we were both slush readers for the Viking Press. And reading slush with somebody, the things you find funny, the things you find sad, the things you never forget, it's a good way to get to know somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, she was funny, so was I.
Hmm.
I wouldn't, and I discovered things about myself writing that I would not have known. And in the middle of that, my daughter got triple negative breast cancer, which is a very scary breast cancer. And it was Chuck who got me through that. Well, not just Chuck, but with Chuck, I could just break. It's funny. It's the kind of thing that could really burn a complete hole through a friendship and never be repaired. But somehow, once we were through it, we were closer than we'd ever been before in a way I couldn't have imagined being with anybody. I mean, I don't think anybody ever knew me so well, and I certainly knew him. And we really had, there was a reason why we were friends instantly, and it came back. You know,
Mm-hmm.
an awful lot of it was the kind of certain kind, maybe not, certainly not only, but a certain kind of humor and memory. And the guy who had written a letter to the president of the Viking Press, so of course came to us in slush, and he wanted to write about his experiences managing the produce department. I've written about this.
I remember.
And he'd seen so much, and he didn't know how to do it. And the last line was, I'll do anything you say. And for the next 40 years, one or the other of us could say, I'll do anything you say. And both knew, it just all came back. It was just, you can't leave that behind. We did.
Go ahead.
Well, we tried. I mean, we did try. We'd go out for dinner, and it was very boring and comfortable. And then we'd go out for dinner again, and we'd go out for dinner again. And then finally we began to remember what we had liked about each other from them. And
I feel like more could be written about friendship if
you could write about the broken parts.
No, well, I mean, just in general, just more needs to be written about friendship, deep friendship.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know. I feel like doing a little bit of that. I have this little chapbook about the clay figures I've made, and there's Chuck in there. And I realized if I really wanted to, I could turn that into more than it is. But it makes me sad. Anyway, yeah, friendship is incredible. And I mean, I don't know. I think I've had 2 really extremely close friends in my life, and lots of other people I love, but 2 really close friends. And one of them was Chuck.
You say what did you learn? I mean, if you're willing to share, what did you learn writing about, what did you learn about yourself
I
in
learned I
writing?
was angry at Catherine.
Oh,
which I hadn't known. I was angry at Chuck.
uh,
And then at a certain point, I realized I was really angry with Catherine too. And and at the day I realized it, she said, I'm going home, Mom. She lived in Pennsylvania then. She said, we're leaving today. And I said, please don't, please don't, please don't. I'll be back in an hour. And I was back in an hour and she stayed. And we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And that was what we needed to do, both of us.
mhm.
But I hadn't known it until I had been in the middle of writing it.
And did that conversation then inform the writing? Were you able to write? Um,
I didn't write about the conversation, but I did. I'm pretty sure. I think I wrote about that moment when I realized that I'd been angry with her,
mhm,
but I was. I mean, she was what 25 and he was 40 something, and come on.
mhm,
But people people fall in love with each other and then they fall out of love with each other, and you can't really blame them for it. You can blame them a little bit for what the mess it makes, but God knows I've made messes in my day.
mhm, mhm.
Um, that was, yeah. I'm glad he asked me to write it. I'm glad I wrote it. I did
Mhm,
learn a lot.
mhm,
You learn a lot about what you don't know you're feeling, or you learn what you don't know you're feeling, and then you feel it, and that's a big help.
mhm. Just by confronting it on the page, just by meeting yourself
Yeah,
on the page,
yeah,
simple act of writing.
yeah. It's so helpful, and it's so much. I mean, sometimes very painful fun, but it's clarity. I mean, what there is such comfort in clarity.
Mm,
I remember when a second tumor grew in the breast that had just been would taken the tumor out, and she was in the middle of chemo, and another tumor grew in the breast, and I called Chuck, and I was out of my mind, and all he said very calmly, he said, "But Abigail, that's what this cancer does. That's what it is." And that clarity, it didn't make it go away, but there was such comfort in putting it where here it is. This is
mhm,
the definition of it. This
mhm,
isn't coming from nowhere. This is and that's when I realized clarity, comfort and clarity are, and you get it from writing
mhm,
and
mhm.
also from friendship and love and all the rest of it. But
Would you be willing, I want to be respectful of your time here. Would you be willing to read that piece choices from your
sure.
book before we close?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. Sure. Um,
So
I thought
this
that
is
was a
this is
really,
from the appendix of her new book, Still Life at 80, where she has some reflections on the writing process.
I can't help writing about writing. It was
Mm,
such an interesting thing for you to want me to read because okay, choices. I've always been curious about why one chooses fiction for one story and nonfiction for another. For me, it's pretty simple. Some stories need to be served straight up. That's nonfiction. Others need more architecture. That's fiction. It's a decision best left to the gut. It's been a long time since I wrote fiction. It felt like flying when it went well, but then so does everything. It was thrilling to go chasing some bright scrap of cloth or a pregnant Dalmatian or a wild goose, but sooner or later, once I'd had my fun, I'd have to put a roof over its head, give it a place to live, and a reason for existing. Nonfiction comes easily. When something catches my eye or keeps cropping up, I write. I've been at this long enough to know the next interesting thing often shows up in disguise. A bug, say, or a certain shade of blue, or a joke someone told that wasn't funny. These bits and pieces don't have to get dressed up for the occasion. I'm distilling, not decorating. All I have to do is get it down, and get it right, get in and get out. It's when I'm not quite hitting the bullseye that I'm flummoxed. There are any number of fragments I've brooded over for days, trying to find that elusive missing bit, needing to get rid of the unsatisfied feeling when I read it aloud to myself. I'm better at cutting. My friend Chuck used to call me the samurai editor. I love the word fragment. It has a jagged quality. I looked it up in my American Heritage Dictionary of Indo-European roots and find it's a straight shot back to the beginning because its ancestor, BHREG, meant to break. I'm not sure writing is our way of fixing what's broken, although that's often a byproduct of writing. Sometimes the word fragment could more accurately be described as shrapnel. And the trick is to determine where the pain originates, remove the foreign object with surgical precision, and see what it is. Painful, but it's part of the deal. I never know if what I'm writing will add up to anything, but I'm always curious to see where my mind goes when it's off leash. What does it stop to inspect? What does it return to? What the hell am I doing? What are all these memories doing in here? Then there's a physical rush, like falling in love, when what I'm doing begins to reveal itself. I had my 80th birthday in 2021. What am I up to? I'm an old woman picking up the pieces of her day, wondering where they might lead, loving the journey.
Mm. Thank
I
you so
love
much.
it when I was so happy when I thought of the word shrapnel because it's
It's
so
so graphic
I
and
know, and really, sometimes the things you have to pick out are you're left bleeding all over the place.
but that, I mean, so captures that the spirit of what you do. Yes, shrapnel is so painful and intense. And then there's this curiosity of, what is that piece of
What is that?
shrapnel? What is that doing in there?
How do you
looking
get
looking
in there?
looking at it from all angles. Um
Yeah,
anyway, but we just have a couple people asking if you have any favorite writers or poets that you want to share with us.
I
If not,
love
that's
Ellen.
okay.
I love Ellen Bass. I love Marie Howe. I love what's his name? Lunch Poems. Oh, come on, everybody knows his name. Oh, yeah, I do have a lot. I love a guy named Tom Hennon whose book is called Darkness Sticks to Everything. And it's
Hmm.
wonderful. He's a Midwestern, I guess he's probably a farmer, but his prose poems in the back are just absolutely wonderful. Tom Hennon, Darkness Sticks to Everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just now I can't think of anything.
No, it's okay.
Autobiography of a Face by Lucy Greeley
Hmm.
was as raw and honest and just marvel. It's an absolutely marvelous memoir, and everybody should read that.
And
Um,
were you trying to think of Jack Gilbert? Is that the
no, I
name?
wasn't trying to think, although I knew Jack and Jerry Stern, whom I went out with for a while. No, Jack Gilbert's wonderful book about he wasn't, about. I will write it to you when I'm trying to think of something I
Yeah,
can't.
of course. I know. These are such hard questions, but I think people are just curious to hear what you're reading, what you gravitate towards, and just to get a
Poem.
little of Abigail Thomas to rub off on us, I think.
Oh, I wish I knew what everybody was writing, what everybody there was writing, and if you're having fun.
Hmm. Do you have a chat? Do you have your chat box open? Maybe people can do you, Abigail? Can you see
Oh, do I
everybody?
have a chat box? Oh, yes, but I now have to go into the other room and plug in my computer because its battery
Oh, no, we'll
disappeared.
we'll let you go. I don't want to keep you, but
I
we'll
know.
just get a tour of your house in the meantime.
Oh, well, there's a whole bunch of clay here, but I don't think you can see it.
Oh, I want to see your clay. Can you show us
Well,
some
it's
of it?
hard. Um, yeah, probably. Only I don't know how to. I don't know how to make my computer. Can you see anything?
Yes. Tell us
Any
what that is.
faces?
Hmm.
I don't know whether you can see.
Yes, we can see them.
I have thousands and thousands. And I have pregnant women and naked men and people reading, sitting on boxes reading.
Hmm.
I have, yeah, it's impossible, really impossible with just this. Oh, I love these readers with their legs crossed, but I don't know if you can see them.
Mm-hmm. We can.
You can?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. They're very messy. I don't like things finished all tidily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Did you say, did I hear that the book you're working on is related to your work with clay?
yeah, it's all about the clay. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's all about when Chuck died in his room in hospice. I think this is in the book. Was a clay statue somebody had clearly made. And I said to my daughter, I'd love to do that sometime. So she gave me a box of air dry clay. And then when Chuck died, I started to make things, and I've got every surface is covered. But it's
Mm-hmm.
really fun because you never quite know who you're getting or what it's going to be. And you can plan to do a dog, and the clay just will not be a dog today.
Mm-hmm.
Die
Mm-hmm.
again and again. It knows what it wants to be, and it will wait till you find it. Or you
Mm-hmm.
have to just give up. Anyway, it's fun. Making things is so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Painful when it's writing too, but it's just we're supposed to do this
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise, I mean, we all need the one thing we do just for ourselves. And if it works out to be nice for other people, goody.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing you do that's your own, just your own. It can be cooking, it can be so many different things, but right now I like clay and writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What
So
are
is everybody here a writer? Yes.
they are, I believe I know a lot of the people in the room. I don't know every single person. But yes, I think and largely I am working with people who are writing, personal stories, personal
Memoir.
narrative, and very much in the same spirit that you talk about, like the discovery of that, what it is
Yeah.
that wants to come out, what is it that wants to be told. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
thank you very much. It was very nice to be here. You're
And
a
I
very
don't
wonderful person to talk to.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And you're, I don't know if you can see the chat, but everyone's saying thank you. And
Oh, thank you.
you filled up our day and our hearts and our souls. And I think all of us will do a little bit of writing today
Oh, please
or
do.
creating or something, right?
This is my new assignment, or it's not that new. Start with the line, "This is a lie I've told before."
Hmm.
Of course, maybe nobody lied. It's just,
This is a lie I've told before. All
this,
right. Let's all work with that today.
and you
It's a
can
good
send it to me when you're done.
send it to you.
Yeah. Sure.
Beautiful.
Thank you very, very much.
You
Thank you.
have a beautiful day, and my heart is full. Thank you so much, Abby.
It is a beautiful day. Thank you.